director, along with
my name's Carlos Hermida.
Always casual, aren't you?
Hi everybody. Gary, we got an exciting show, don't we?
We do. It's been an exciting week too. I mean, we had an election, so I hear.
Yeah, we can't really do this show. All of our guests aren't exactly involved in the president race or whatever, but we can't exactly do the show without talking about the new president, right?
We will do that. I'm concerned for his mental health, but I do have a proposal, and that is that we get a GoFundMe campaign to get our current president at least 90 days of gummies, preferably indica, so that he can manage to do as well as he can over the next 3 months. There's a couple of problems with that, of course, because he lives on federal land, and in DC, as Chris knows, you are not allowed to imbibe on federal property. But the good news is he can't be fired. So if he is caught with possession, I think he'll be okay, and will be okay. And maybe he'll even use those next 90 days to do an executive order to finally get things moving in the right direction. But I doubt it. So let's just go ahead and get him some decent sedation.
Wouldn't that be cool if he was just screw it and just got high and did nothing for the rest?
And if he gets arrested for possession, he can always pardon himself before the end of the term.
It's a win-win. If he got high, we might see a little balance in something. I'm just...
and we'll get into all the election results pretty soon, but we want to discuss about how important veterans are to the cannabis movement, to our country, and what we can do to thank them for their service, and how they continue to move this whole program forward. To that effect, we have two great guests.
Yes. Okay. So apparently I should introduce them.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my dear friend, wonderful amiga, Kelly from Weed for Warriors Project. Right. What is your last name? It's I went through actually I have it right here.
Waller's Parrot.
Waller's Parrot.
Like the bird with an extra T. That was a good time in the Army, I'll tell you what.
Kelly here is the head of the vice president of the Weed for Warriors Project in Tampa. And me and Kelly have a great relationship where, my store here at Chillum that we go live from, she comes and bothers me and thinks she works here. No, she holds meetings that are very important, and she's able to outreach to the veterans community, and they congregate here, and they're able to help each other out and, network and discuss things that veterans have to deal with. And, maybe Kelly can say just 2 seconds about what she does there.
As far as it goes with the project, so the Weed for Warriors Project is a national project, but we have chapters in states that are either legal, recreationally, or medically. The goal is for us to advocate for veterans who would use cannabis in lieu of the pharmaceuticals that the VA throws at us. A lot of us came out of service with service-connected injuries, physically and mentally, and we're just kind of handed pills and here you go, have a good day. So we're advocating for being able to medicate naturally, to not be dependent on medications, to also reduce the addiction rate, because addiction is a huge thing, especially in the military and then getting out. And then also making sure that our vets are connected to the resources they need. The veteran suicide rate is 22 a day. They want to say it's 20. That doesn't make it any better. It just doesn't. That's one vet an hour on average killing themselves. So we want to make sure that our vets have the resources, whether it's they need to get into the VA, back into the VA, they need new doctors, they need, psychiatric care. We just need that fellowship, because I love you, Carlos, but I couldn't sit there and have a conversation with you about the things that I went through and you to 100% understand, and vice versa. And just checking in on each other, because that's the biggest thing. Everybody will ask, what does a veteran need? I need support. I need to be checked in on. Pushing for, cannabis is medically, legal in Florida, but recreational. Just making sure that we have access to clean, safe medications. And it really just is living by the I've got your six, which in the military is just jargon for I've got your back. I'm going to be there. It's important enough to me that I have it tattooed on the inside of my arm. so that other veterans can see it and know that this is a safe place. Because, you know, it's a struggle. I've been out 8 years and it still is a struggle. So making sure that nobody has to go through those struggles that we did coming out is kind of what we're here about.
And just below Kelly, we have Keyston Franklin, who is coming down here from Chicago. Are you part of one of the Fighting Illini, as a matter of fact?
No, I am not, actually. I went to Governor State University and doing a master's at University of Chicago. So I went to Chicago for university. 9/11 happened, and then that changed my whole trajectory. So after getting out of service, I went back to school to finish up the master's program. But born and raised here in Florida, you know. So
well, tell us about your military service and about the Halo group, the holding group that you currently work for. Who makes that up?
Sure. My time in service, Army, even though I'm wearing Air Force, you know, we love all our branches. You know, over the years, you exchange shirts and patches and stuff like that. This just happened to be one of the closest things at the laundry with the girls. I got 2 little girls. So, but no, I love my time in service. It was first as a medic and then switched over to Intel. I did some other work after that. And, you know, I completely echo everything that Kelly said, especially during this time of COVID. It's support, it's in inclusivity when it comes to veterans, and even awareness and education on how this plant can be of benefit, not just to the veteran community, but you know, to the population as a whole. As Gary said, you know, everyone can benefit, you know, from the everyday worker, marginalized worker, to the president of the United States. So that was the approach that we took, you know, with the Halo Cannabis. And it started, you know, we started in Illinois as soon as the Farm Bill Act was passed, or Farm Bill was passed into an act. We got into hemp. You know, my personal story was, you know, I gotten out of service, service-connected disabilities. I was on lidocaine, hydrocortisone, all sorts of pharmaceutical stuff that the VA and actually, you know, active Army hospital gave to it. And my quality of life sucked. You know, like I said, I had 2 little girls. I could barely, it was like a zombie, and I needed a better approach. And it was one of the older veteran mentors who said, "Hey, dude, you know, this plant will make you balanced and it'll cure you." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Well, I can't say that." He goes, "But you'll feel much better." And then that started me on CBD and then on cannabis. And then, you know, I started to explore this. And this was about 2015, 2016. I'm recently out. And as I explored it, you know, I found that there are a lot of benefits mentally and physically for this plant, but there's a lot of opportunity on the employment side. And there's so much research and innovation that can be had, as well as businesses that can be erected by exercising this plant and then getting engaged with it. So we started the group to, 1, educate veterans in cannabis, and then 2, provide opportunities so they can be employed in cannabis. And then as we were in there, we're like, oh, there's some resources that needs to be addressed, and some legislation that needs to be changed. Because even if a veteran's in a cannabis friendly state, and then they're working in that area, they cannot get banking in some places. They can't get mortgages in some places. So there's a whole slew of things. But Halo Cannabis, we're a community forward organization, and we're engaged in cannabis, everything from retail, cultivation, and then also delivery. But we're completely for veteran empowerment and community growth and development.
I understand that you're working possibly on a licensing situation in Florida. I know you can't talk much about it, but it's good to know that these things are open and available for veterans, because here in Florida, when we're supposed to have some kind of a competitive process to get a license, it appears that is not going to appear for so many people. And it's good to see that a group like yours is engaged in trying to change that, and adding a crucial step that hasn't been done here in Florida. Although people talk the talk, they don't actually walk the walk, and that has to do with social equity. Tell me what social equity means to you and to your group, and what you think could happen here in Florida, and what may have already happened in Chicago, in Illinois.
Well, yeah, no, I can speak Florida and Chicago. Social equity to me, is that everyone has a lot of different ideas. Equity is not equality, stuff like that. Social equity is being able to engage your community and those folks that were affected by the war on drugs, um, being able to engage in the cannabis industry. For too long, marijuana, as it's called, it was a bad thing. It's not cannabis. And then when it switched over to cannabis, those individuals who were arrested and incarcerated and prohibited from jobs and even college education because they had a drug charge, or they weren't able to benefit from this plant, whereas other individuals were able to make millions and now billions of dollars. So that social equity component is giving opportunity for those folks who have been marginalized, those communities that have been, raped and pillaged, I guess, if you will, because of this drug or stigma, a chance to get into this industry. And the problem that we've had in Illinois, and I can speak to about 2015, is the barrier of entry into cannabis industry is so high that it almost restricts and eliminates half of the folks who would be social equity eligible from either getting into the business or being able to sustain themselves in there. And I've seen similar, I'm new to the Florida cannabis market, but it seems to be a similar scenario. Even with the licenses that came out, in Illinois, they have a social equity program, and only 2 organizations out of the 75 licenses are social equity. Well, forgive me. So they're labeled as social equity, but there's a loophole, where the ownership is not all social equity, but the employees may fall under that qualifying factor. And that's some of the things that we'd love to address when they're rolling out some of the social equity legislation in some of these other states. 5 other states that came out, don't allow just individuals to employ individual or social equity individuals in the business. Give an opportunity to own. And in Florida, I don't believe. And Gary, Kelly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a social equity license operating.
There is not. So Florida is for me, it is a joke that to even work in a dispensary, you can't have cannabis charges. You have to pass a drug test and not have cannabis in your system. But then these MMTCs will help their employees or bud tenders or whatever they want to call them get their medical cannabis license or require them to have it beforehand. Also, for me, I'm looking at, I don't know if you guys are aware, the current situation of cookies coming into Florida. So cookies to me, great. I'm sure a lot of people love their products. Cookies to me is what I call, it's flashy, it's packaging to the point where people will get, fake packaging, things like that. And for me to see that people are getting so excited that cookies is coming here, and it's a catch-22. It's going to be the first minority who's holding an MMTC license. Great. But look at who it is. He's coming from another state. And we have minority veterans who have groups like yours that have the holdings to come together and buy a license. We have other minorities in this state, but they can't even get the license because the rate of charging and incarcerating minorities for nonviolent cannabis charges. So you're telling me we want you to work in the cannabis industry, but you can't have anything cannabis related. So what you're telling me is you want to whitewash this still. If I go into a dispensary and I have to talk to somebody, and I honestly, for me, I choose to use dispensaries where I know there's more minorities, that I know that there's, as much social equity as possible, but it is such a larger picture. There's nothing in Florida that guarantees it. And Kano can let you know, we've had to sue the state and back and forth legislation for them to even get rid of this cartel that we have. And even that is not going that quickly. It's a pay to play. Somebody can buy a license and sit on it and sit on it and sit on it and sit on it. And meanwhile, we've got veterans, we've got minority veterans who really want to get into this to heal themselves and to heal other veterans, and it's making it impossible. It's even if you came in with all of the money and it's, oh, well, you had a cannabis charge, such and such. So that should bar me from having a cannabis business? If anything, that just shows I'm more knowledgeable about the cannabis. And, these are just, excuse my language, shitty laws. It just is what it is. The laws set up to prey on minorities, to prey on those that don't have equity. So Florida is just, we're just leave it at that. But there's nothing in place.
Well,
even if there is,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of going to be like, what's going on in Chicago, where they're going to have the loopholes and they're going to cherry pick. And for me, I look at it because they know the more people that they're letting in and the more minorities they're letting in, then they don't get to sit here and get the money in from incarceration, from pharmaceuticals. And it's always about the money, always.
Yeah, especially when you got the Geo group over here in Florida, who has a major hold on the legislation, and of course they are the private prison, as many customers as possible. So they push that, and then of course there's also the treatment center folks who also have a fair stay in making certain that as many people either get incarcerated or get forced to be put into a program which they really don't need, and that is basically where we stand now. Keith, tell me, in Chicago or in Illinois, out of the city of Chicago because of what Mayor Whitehouse is doing, the state, or is it pretty much even?
There are pockets. Chicago, there's a heavy presence in social equity just because of the influx of individuals. You have approximately 3 million people, in the city. But there are pockets in Illinois where there's a lot of social equity applicants who apply. We had over 4,500 applications in Illinois, and then I think it was like what was it, like 80% of them was all social equity. So it's
what is the cost of an application in Illinois?
What was that?
What is the cost of the application itself?
The application itself is $5,000, but for social equity, they discounted it 50%, and same thing with the license. So it was $2,500 per application that was able to be submitted, and then the licensing fee is $60,000. So for $30,000 for social equity applicants. So,
and of course, here in Florida, the application fee is $60,000. Slightly higher.
Yeah.
Well, there's like 2 licenses that were sold at like 90 something ridiculous, like 95 million. Like, what was that?
Actually, Scythian Group bought three boys for 125 million. That was the highest one.
Million for one license.
Well, when you're getting into a closed market, it made folks like Adam Behrman just drool their way into Florida, and didn't expect as to how much kind of pushback they had. But and of course, here in Florida, you also have to post a $5 million bond with your financials. Not most people have that in their back pocket, and they did promise, believe it or not, one minority license that would be given to the Black Farmers Association agriculturists. That, however, still is in litigation after 3 years, in part because there's a Native American group that believes that they should also have a minority license. But the question is, why should there only be one minority license in a state? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. With all due respect, that is not social equity. That is, and I'm going to use a dirty word here, tokenism.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And
in a lot of aspects, Florida is the laughing stock in a number of levels. I think that we can do better. And I think that if we do have somebody who does acquire a license, of which there are several to be acquired right now, that does have minority status and that does work with veterans, that will be the way to go, because I don't see it happening through legislation at this point in time, though we want to try. And that's what we're hoping to see.
But Gary, even with that, even if somebody came in and said, I'm applying for this license, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for vets. As much as we want to say we love our vets, it's not true. It's simply not true. I have stood in front of the state Senate, and they have looked me in my face and said, thank you for your service, but no, then you don't get to thank me for anything. And like you said, it is tokenism. It's like, look, we did this for this person, but it's People are buying up the licenses, sitting on them here, and selling it to the highest bidder. I will go online and look to see who holds a license and who has, dispensaries operating under these licenses. And there are names I don't even recognize, and they have no dispensaries, but they've been sitting on this license since they could buy it. And then it's just sell it to the highest bidder. Like, sell it to cookies. And I'm sure I'm going to get backlash, people who love cookies. That's great. Love cookies, go there, whatever. I don't care. The point is, we're yelling and screaming and praising, oh, we have a minority coming into Florida. But we have minorities who live in Florida who should get these licenses and who should have the opportunity and understand, like you said, that we don't all have $5 million sitting in our back pocket. And even if we collectively came together, that's not something that's going to happen overnight. So you could yell and scream that, oh, we've got a minority coming in. Like you said, there's litigation going on back and forth. But you have people still coming in from other states. Everybody's like, oh, but you didn't want, the cartel going on. You wanted other states to come in. Right, but you're not looking at, it's kind of like with the analogy, everything starts at home first. So look inside your own home and see who needs that opportunity.
Now, in regards to social equity,
I would rather Kano if he lived here. It just is. Everything looks good for PR for us, but then when people actually start taking action, then it's a step back and it's, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know you were really going to act on this. So now let's put you through the runaround of court, of denying, of let's make it more expensive. You said an application fee is somebody's salary or two people's salary if they're just at a living wage. So you want somebody to take two people's salary for a year just to apply, and it's not guaranteed.
Well, the also situation of the higher the cost of getting in, the more money you have to raise, and the question is, where is that money coming from? And I'm not going to put too much aspersions on Curaleaf, but is it coming from the western part of the Soviet Union? Or is the money coming from a laundered criminal enterprise, or is this finally going to be a clean industry eventually? If we can get people who are not only just interested in opening businesses, but actually helping the community in which they are part of, more than just bringing in tax money. I mean, it's nice that there are states that are tax the hell out of cannabis, so that when the dispensaries pay the states, they get money to put roads and things of that sort. But there's a lot of things that can be done for the community, more than just tax people who are trying to buy their medicine at a much higher rate.
Let's look at Oregon for an example. Oregon recently passed not making certain hard drugs a criminal offense anymore. But people don't look at, I've seen people go back and forth and talk about, oh, that's so horrible. And I'm like, first off, you don't understand how addiction works in this whole entire program. They also don't know that the taxes from cannabis are helping pay for this program. To me, that's a great thing. We are transitioning. We're using cannabis. People are using cannabis to heal, but we still know those people that have addiction issues, especially with things like cocaine, heroin, things like that. So why not take something, a natural plant that, great, they're going to tax the hell out of it, but at least we're using, I would be okay and comfortable if I knew, okay, I had a higher tax on something, but it's legitimately helping people recover, and then they're going to move towards this plant. They're going to live better lives. And yeah, where does the money come from? I think a lot of these companies and a lot of these politicians who back forget that we can easily search who's lining their pockets and who they're contributing to. And it just is like, you don't get to say, we care about veterans, we care about patients, we want to, reduce the opioid crisis. But then you make it so hard for somebody to even do that. And it's just continued and continued and continued. It just is like, you don't get to be on paper or next to me and take a picture and like, look, here it is, I love my vets. And then when I say, this is what we need, this is what when minority vets come out and say, this is what we need. And it's just like, well, you looked good for my picture, but I don't want to back anything else.
Keystone, what do you see the cannabis industry doing social equity for the community in which they are a part?
What are they doing for it? I echo everything that Kelly said.
What is it possible if the cannabis industry can get back to the community?
Right. Well, the first thing is reducing that cost to get in there, and then support some of the build out of some of the businesses through programming. Illinois, I'll speak to that first. They started off, it was a $500,000, application, or sorry, $100,000 application fee back in 2014, 2015. The group I was with then, when we were looking at, going into Illinois in the medical side, because we knew the benefits for veterans, we were like, I don't know, is it really worth it? They reduced that. Granted, it took them about 5 years to come down, but that $2,500 or $5,000 application fee, and that's pretty much standard around the country. It makes it obtainable to even get into into the game, to even build out. Most of the states, they're 5,000, 10,000. You got Arkansas 20,000 still, a couple of places 120,000. Florida being one of the highest at 70,000. But that's the first step. Having programs and then licenses specifically for social equity applicants. I know in Massachusetts right now, they have a delivery service for social equity applicants that's only eligible for social equity. And then, and if we're looking at Florida, you've got vertical integration here. They don't foresee any type of recreational use. And then the scary part is, with the new president, and you do schedule this drug, you're going to have a whole bunch of large, big farm, big money corporations coming in who are going to be able to buy those licenses. Yep. And that's going to push out the opportunity for veterans or social equity applicants. And so, Florida, honestly, I'd love to see micro business support for, veteran-owned businesses and the minority-owned businesses to help support some of these vertical licenses until they go recreational, or I don't know if they're going to carve out, separate from retail to cultivation and break up that vertical license. I know there was some talk about that, but there's definitely got to be some support, one on the application aspect for social equity applicants, on the operations support, funding that comes out of the taxation from these operating businesses, to going into supporting communities and business development and training and research for social equity and veterans. And then the last thing is just a simple awareness. As Kelly spoke about, it's control. They're saying like, yeah, we want to do something for you, but they aren't doing shit. It's like you really gotta do it, and it's not just one person, one token, one poster child. It's got to be inclusive. Veteran population in Florida, they want it. The veteran population across the country wants it. I just saw an article, was it that Tampa VA is going to be testing vaccines on veterans? You can tell me you're going to volunteer. Yeah, you're going to volunteer. Veterans, hey, we're going to test this on you, but you aren't given the opportunity to make money and actually be in an industry that helps their physical and mental well-being. To me, it seems a little bit, backwards. But back to the social equity component, there are going to be a lot of programs that roll out with these new states. I'm a little fearful of descheduling of this drug without some of those social equity issues being worked out. If they aren't worked out, then it's, I think we might as well kiss, the whole social equity goodbye, because we're going to see more of that tokenism. And it's just not going to be, beneficial to the veteran community, the minority community, and marginalized workers. So
well, one of the actual good things about Florida's legislative process and their the financial process is that veterans are considered a minority business. Veterans can contract with MMTCs for micro businesses and things of that sort and get some kind of and be able to inch into that, not making it necessarily fully vertical, but to have kind of a branch from the vertical so that they can contract with these MMTCs. Would that help? I think we lost your audio.
Oh, it looks like
yeah, I'll comment on that. All in all, what we see right now is
there you go.
The main with what we're seeing with legislation is that the legislation that you get is often reflective of the makeup of the body passing the laws.
Yes.
we have a vertically integrated system that is treating minorities and veterans as tokens, it is because those in power think it's okay to treat minorities and veterans. And to Kelly's point, when you get up there in the Florida legislature and you're sitting before, and if we want to get partisan, let's get partisan. If you're sitting up before the Florida Republican-led legislature and they tell the veteran, thank you for your service, but then they tell that same veteran, no, you can't have access to life-saving medicine. No, you can't have access to home grow. No, you can't go out and get you a job and not be precluded from that job because you utilize this medicine. All these things are reflective of the current leadership and why we need a real change and why elections matter. And that's going to be part of, what we roll into the second part of the show and talking about these elections. But, in the long and short of it, Keystone, you're up there in Illinois, which has a different makeup, a different legislature, but somehow they wound up with the same result of creating a vertically integrated system. So, to Kelly's point about both parties being the same sometimes, that definitely doesn't look good. So tell us a little bit more about how did Illinois arrive at its current system, which obviously has some shortcomings.
Right. So, Gary, I missed my computer froze or phone froze a little bit, so I missed that last part. But yeah, I'm actually yeah. Thanks. I'm actually in Florida, so we're erecting hemp, and then I'm also closing this deal here in Florida for cannabis. But how Illinois rose, arrived at this social equity component, it was simply because people were saying, "Hey, this is not right." We have millions of folks in Chicago alone incarcerated because of this war on drugs, and this, we have companies that are making millions of dollars a month, tens of millions of dollars a month. And then they aren't even giving back to the community where there are addictions, where there are mental health resources that are needed. We had a food desert, and that none of those neighborhoods received any support from this highly taxed, industry. And so we a lot of folks and a nonprofit that I worked with, and then couple other committee folks, we pushed. We was like, hey, this got to change. And then also it's got to change for, veteran support, because there's a lot. And that was kind of the way we pushed through legislation. So it is saying, if you guys want to help veterans, this is really how you're going to do it. We can say you guys are helpful for veterans, or we can say you really don't care and it's all just a ploy. And that's almost what got us, literally what got us to the table to say, one, you got to include veterans in some of these applications. You got to give some sort of, not necessarily preference, but you got to give some opportunities along with social equity. There's a huge fight actually going on in Illinois about veteran preference, and then even points in how they're grading some of the applications, which is crazy. There's about 5 lawsuits in Illinois challenging how this last dispensary round was graded. Most of it is, technical in the fact that there's inconsistencies in the grading of the application, but the legislation was actually the cause of the issue. As was spoken earlier, the legislation was written by folks who's like, oh yeah, we can make this legal. We can make a lot of money. And we can make it so only a few select individuals make a lot of money. So let's write that in. And then after the wolves came at the door and we knocked, and they're like, okay, we'll let you in. But it was a snafu, and it was a dream that was sold that is still not being, cashed. That you can't cash the check now because no one has really a license because of this legislation.
And I believe you also had a legislator who actually invested in the industry when she was precluded from doing so.
It's Illinois. I moved up to Illinois from Florida, and one of the guys said this to me when I first moved up in 2000. And he's like, "It's Illinois." Well, he's like, "It's where our governors make our license plates." But corruption is
straight hair.
It's a place where if you're close to those who make the rules, you're going to benefit from it. And you'll see that in Illinois and Chicago's history for the past half a century, if not the last century. But that should change. And that was one of the things, and I think Kelly mentioned it, and Ted as well, getting folks in get legislation as representatives to write these bills who are keen and are empathetic to minorities and then to veterans. By getting them into this space, a seat at the table to voice, and not only voice, but actually put pen to paper and then vote on some of these changes is the only way it's going to happen. If we keep allowing the same folks to represent the majority and they're not, it's still going to continue down the same road of benefiting that select few. And minorities and veterans are going to be left out, which is, to me, disheartening and it's outright wrong.
Well, I just the next segment. Well, I know we got to move on to the election situation. I appreciate Kelly and Keiston coming in today and telling us what's going on. Folks, watch Halo Cannabis closely. You're going to see some explosive things here in Florida. I can't tell you what it is yet, but if you watch, you'll find out. Keith, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for your service, of course, and for everybody in your group who also served our country. Kelly, we always love you guys. Now, if you want to hang on and with us while we're talking about the election, you can. But we do have to cover the other topic. But you guys are great. We greatly appreciate it. And Keeston, by the way, is also a member of the NCAA, another great company that he's not a spokesman of the National Cannabis Industry Association, but you work within the banking committee. So you're going to bring a certain amount of expertise in regards to that banking thing to Florida, which I think we so desperately need as well. And we are looking forward to seeing it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's in the Banking and Financial Services Committee, and they're looking at solutions, one for the inclusivity of the minorities and veterans, but also in some of the resource and support. And banking and financing is, from the top down, from the owners, being able to process transactions to customers who are able to utilize some of the traditional banking solutions and resources that they've been barred from because cannabis is no longer it's federally illegal. And then being able to provide some sort of support and protection statewide in that space is, the push and the mandate of Banking Financial Services Committee. Not speaking for them, but that's just some of the things that we're looking at.
I know you're not Marine, but because Chris is, I'm obligated to say simplify.
Well, thank you.
I
don't know what to say to that. I'm sorry. I was like, what?
Somebody have to hit the beach. That's the way it is.
I'll just say things.
The way it is. Jarhead or otherwise.
Keiston, I appreciate
that.
A key point through all of this is it doesn't matter what party is passing the laws in your state. The problem is not partisan. It's about corruption. And as long as there are, powers that be with large amounts of money influencing these legislators, they're going to continue to design cannabis industry systems which preclude the average person from getting in, and which precludes veterans, which precludes minority business owners. And the fact of the matter is the vast majority of enlisted folks never retire as millionaires, and even a lot of officers don't even get the opportunity to get beyond the working class in some cases. And so it is definitely a point to show that, in this industry, there needs to be some real changes in the people who are making the laws if we're going to see an industry that's properly regulated and allow, folks to get into it, to remove those barriers to entry that we currently see across the nation.
Yeah, bars and stars don't necessarily make you a better man, but definitely makes you richer when it comes to the military.
No, I agree. But it's folks like you guys, and I appreciate, I must say this, thank you for all that you're doing and increasing awareness, and then also going out and pushing change in legislation, even giving folks like me the opportunity to come out and speak on some of our experiences and supporting some of the initiatives that we want to see in place and push. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. And when in Illinois, go to the doobie room. Don't ask me why.
So okay. It's just the three of us now.
It's just the three of us. I think we're alone now. Anyways.
It's just the two of us.
We have just been through a horrendous election. It was full of divisiveness. It was full of wailing and gnashing of teeth. It was an election of biblical proportions, both in the turnout, and in the damage that was done during the election, and now it's time to heal. Now, just again, for you guys who are heavily into conspiracy theories, and you know who you are because they know who you are. But just so you know, in 2016, you may remember on election night, they had declared by projection, AP and other organizations, that Trump was the winner. Hillary did concede, and President Trump at that point in time did accept that concession and assumed the fact that he was the president-elect on election night, approximately 2 weeks at least before all the certification of the states. So then anybody goes ahead and tells you that we never claim victory based on projections that come from the AP and from these other organizations who get their information basically from the supervisors of elections from all the various states. You're wrong, with all due respect. And all these conspiracy theories you hear, take them with a grain of salt. Go back and notice what has happened in history, and you'll see exactly where we stand right now. We look forward to a good transition. I know that a lot of people were upset. Of course, a lot of it was his conspiracy. But in regards to our new vice president, that she incarcerated a rather large amount of people in California, and so therefore it is not necessarily on our side. Just so you know, Kamala Harris is a sponsor of the MORE Act, which will significantly change the cannabis industry. And the fact that when she was in Florida as Attorney General, it was her job to uphold the California law. And if you broke the California law, she was obligated to make certain that arrests were made. Now, California is not immune to making mistakes. Californians do. That they made mistakes back in 1996 when they started opening up Dr. Feelgood things in the beaches where you could get a license for $40 and automatically get your cannabis. But they evolved. They've corrected a lot of things in the meantime. But there are still people who are operating illegally in California. And when you operate illegally, the Attorney General is obligated at that point in time to do what she has to do. But I don't see that as her role in the executive branch. And I think that we will see some relaxing in regards to those kind of things. And possibly if we can get the Senate at least evened out, which is a possibility, we may have a better chance of getting more cannabis related laws federally. What's your opinion on that, Chris?
Well, what we're looking at right now is the control of the United States Senate is still up in the air. And so in the grand scheme of things, looking at where cannabis laws go, currently right now, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate, has refused to hear any legislation coming out of the Democratic-controlled House. Everything from COVID relief to a wide variety of other pieces of legislation. And so that deadlock, that gridlock in Congress right now has created a real problem for folks. And so moving forward, right now the Democrats have essentially 46 Senate seats. The Angus King from Maine and Bernie Sanders from Vermont, both independents, caucus with the Democrats. So that means that these 2 Senate seats in Georgia, which are headed to a runoff on January 5th, will essentially determine if the Democrats are able to match the Republicans' 50 seats. Now, for those of you who might not be up to date on 8th grade American government and civics, when there is a tie with the U.S. Senate, the vice president breaks the tie.
Carlos slept through that. He was in theology class.
So Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who is the sponsor of the MORE Act, would be the deciding vote on the MORE Act in the Senate. And so that is a key thing in turning all eyes to Georgia now in the United States. Should Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff be successful in overtaking the Republican incumbents in the state of Georgia in the United States Senate race, then we can see the House passing the MORE Act. We can see it going on to the Senate. We can see the actual bill sponsor in the Senate, Senator Kamala Harris, as vice president, being the deciding vote on that and sending it to President-elect Biden's desk. So
what do we know of Raphael Warnock, who's the pastor of the Ebenezer Church, and John Ossoff, who's running against Senator Perdue, who has been very prohibitionist in the past?
Yeah, that's exactly what we know. They are not prohibitionists by any means. Reverend Warnock has seen the impacts into his community across the state of Georgia of what the war on drugs has done, everything from the racial profiling, the violation of people's civil rights and constitutional rights, to the disparate impacts on the various communities throughout the state of Georgia. I mean, I-95 itself is patrolled as a major drug highway in America. So, if you're just taking a road trip, you happen to be on the same road where they're looking for drug traffickers, and they treat, every single person whose car, might smell of a joint as such. And that in itself is why a state like Oregon took the step to actually decriminalize, various drug charges altogether. Because the fact of the matter is that there has been no single assault on civil liberties more than the war on drugs. It is what has caused militarization of the police over the past several decades. It is what's caused this era of, oh, I can just check you because you're a criminal because your car smells a certain way. And we've seen time and time again the Supreme Court coming back and saying that smell is just not enough. But at the same time, you can shut up, you can follow the script, you can assert your civil rights, and you can still be brutalized by the police. And so in the grand scheme of things, change is coming at the federal level on the horizon. The biggest thing now that we have to ask every single person to do is to contact your member of Congress and ask them for a floor vote, okay, to the MORE Act. The MORE Act passed the Judiciary Committee in the House last November. It's been almost a year since it passed through the committee, which can then send it to the floor. And the House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer has said that he would schedule it for a floor vote after the elections. It originally was scheduled for a floor vote in September, but because of COVID relief talks, it was put off. Obviously, we saw how those COVID relief talks went. So the most important thing now is to schedule it for a vote, get the first decriminalization bill voted upon in American history for cannabis. I mean, all in all, what we're looking at right now is that the MORE Act would completely remove cannabis off the Controlled Substances Act and exactly where it should be. I know a lot of folks here, who are even in the chat have been talking about they want to see, the ability to grow it at home. They want to see the ability to treat it no differently than their tomatoes and as an agricultural product. Many people who want to be in the cannabis industry, if you will, don't even have a desire to open up storefronts. They rather grow their own, even have boutique style strains that they can then maybe possibly sell to a dispensary, maybe just have it for themselves and among their family and friends. But point being is that as long as cannabis remains a Schedule I drug federally, we're going to continue to see so many problems across the nation. Point in case, an example, in Marion County, they recently fired a dean from a local high school for being a medical marijuana patient, for doing everything legally correct by the book and still lost his position. And that is why, the Suncoast Normal, Gary has been instrumental in working with our board and other legislators in trying to get an employee protection bill passed for medical marijuana patients. And now that this election is over and in the books here in Florida, it is time to now pivot to the upcoming legislative session. And looking federally, now that things are wrapped up, all eyes are now on Georgia because the control of the U.S. Senate will determine the future of cannabis's Schedule I status in the coming years.
Now, what is interesting about cannabis, both nationally and federally, is that the people who are enthusiastic about cannabis are not necessarily totally sequestered into one party. I'll give you a good example. The Colorado race this last year, this last election, where we lost Cory Gardner, who was actually a major proponent of cannabis. In fact, he tried to get Trump to admit that he would be interested in legalizing it, and he said, well, I'll think about it. But at least he got to make certain that the states were left alone by using the amendment that Rohrabacher originally had put in, which we lost on the last election. And in substitute, we now have John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, who, although Colorado was one of the first states that went legal both medically and with adult use, was not exactly instrumental in that particular effort. In fact, in a lot of cases, he was pushed back in part because he was part of the alcohol industry. He owns what 10, 15 breweries that he owns. In fact, when he came over here to Florida, what he did was he went to St. Pete and looked at the microbreweries. Didn't come to any of the MMTCs. What a surprise.
Well, on that note, it's interesting how getting elected and seeing, how your state's industry is thriving can temper and change someone's attitude. Hickenlooper, was a reluctant governor, and now all of a sudden he seems to be pro-cannabis. We in Florida have our own, alcohol industry entrepreneur in Joe Redner, who is with his company Flora Grown. After his successful sale of Cigar City Brewing, is now, with Flora Grown suing all the way up to the, Florida State Supreme Court for the right to have a medical cannabis license, to end the vertical integration, to talk about the unfair process in which we just discussed in the first half of the show of how they set up these licenses. And so, in the grand scheme of things, what we really do need is political change moving forward. The question is, how much political change has occurred after these 2020 elections? And at the federal level, again, if the Democrats don't take control of the Senate, I am not optimistic that a Republican-controlled Senate would pass the MORE Act from a Democratic-controlled House.
Now, in regards to state politics, of course, we have a new speaker and a new president of the Senate. And the new speaker, Chris Sprowls, is not exactly a big fan of cannabis. In fact, he majorly brought what I call the traveling Cassandras, who came to the House and the Senate last year to talk about how cannabis causes psychosis. They brought in Dr. Bertha Madras and that gentleman who wrote the book called Tell Your Children that was big in the New York Times. That was almost all things out of context and fake news and things of that sort that would promote more prohibition than anything else. And he was promoting that particular aspect. And in Florida House, it's very much a top-down soldiers listen to the generals kind of situation. The Senate, not so much there, as Senator Brandis called, we have 40 Somalian warlords. So basically all the senators work on an individual basis, which is actually a good thing because Senator Lee, who was my senator, he stepped down this year, and who won the election for that is Danny Burgess, who was the head of Veterans Affairs here in the state of Florida, and who is more inclined to be pro-cannabis, and he is now a senator. So that gives a lot of clout, and it gives Senator Brandis, who's a libertarian, a compadre that could possibly move things forward in the Senate as well, even though we don't may not have a majority. In fact, we actually lost seats both in the Senate and the House this year as far as the Democrats are concerned. But whether we lost more pro-cannabis people, we had promoted a number of folks, some who won their elections and some who didn't. How'd that turn out, Chris?
Well, all in all, the Democrats who ran, it was a mixed bag. I mean, there's a lot of criticism among the Florida Democratic Party leadership if they did enough to actually turn out. As you can see, Florida went for President Trump, and it was the turnout in Miami-Dade County that many people attribute to the difference maker. In that, when you look at the state, there are essentially islands of Democratic support, and it's in the major cities where the rest of the state in the rural areas tend to lean Republican. I mean, Gary, you live up there in Pasco County. That is no way, shape, or form a blue county, regardless of how many people from Tampa move out to Wesley Chapel. And so that continues to be an issue. And, as long as the legislature has various influences, when you touched on earlier, like the GEO Group running private prisons, like the Florida Medical Association wanting to come in and oftentimes overregulate how doctors and how patients interact with each other, we're going to continue to see an industry that does not put patients first, but essentially puts industry players who can pay to play with the politicians first. And so citizen-led initiatives and ballot measures have been the way the vast majority of this country has overturned the decisions of legislators who have done, who refuse to advance, cannabis and eliminate prohibition. And to that note, what we saw is that 5 states with citizen-led measures passed 6 different measures. In Arizona, they passed Prop 207, which legalizes adult use of marijuana. In Montana, they passed, Initiative 190, which voted to legalize the adult use of marijuana. In Mississippi, the Deep South, they finally voted Initiative 65, which creates a medical cannabis program for them. In South Dakota, they also passed Measure 26, which created a medical cannabis program. But South Dakota also passed Amendment A, which voted to create a legalized adult use program. So South Dakota did something historic on election night. The citizens and voters of South Dakota passed medical marijuana and adult use. The people in that state, a solid red state, recognize that medical cannabis is a vital treatment for folks, and at the same time, folks should not be pushed into a medical system, but should have the ability, if you're 21 and up, to use it. I look at the adult use medical system as having a prescription and being able to get something over the counter without a prescription in its most simplistic form. And I firmly believe that cannabis is something that is no different as far as safety measures as ibuprofen, and Tylenol. And in many cases, it's much safer, because if you down a whole bottle of Tylenol PM, that'll be the last nap you ever take. But if you eat 1,000 milligram edible, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel refreshed.
And let's just look at the numbers. I mean, Arizona is going to end up being a very tight race as far as the presidential race is concerned, 59.9%. And that, though it's not the 71.3 we had here in Florida, obviously it was a bipartisan push that put Arizona's ballot initiative over the top. And then, of course, as far as Montana is concerned, we talked about 57% that won on that. And now New Jersey had a very interesting path here. They actually tried doing it to the legislature, and it got killed in the last few moments. And so they decided, well, let's just put it on the table and put it up in the ballot and give it to the voters. And not too amazingly, with just a very, very simple ballot initiative, which is basically just a question saying, do the Constitution to legalize a controlled form of marijuana called cannabis? The answer was 67% yes, which is far, far more than anybody has won any election in Georgia so far, which just goes to show you that this is on our side. And here at Suncoast Normal, we say normal is the new normal, and that we will be working with the people to help move through these grassroots initiatives to get things done through the legislature, as well as push through ballot initiatives. And now that we finished with the ballot initiatives, it's time to go back to the legislature and deal with the things we've got. And as far as South Dakota is concerned, 69.2%. I thought that was really, really impressive. And Mississippi, 66.8%. And 73.4% for 65 as well. And they had two different initiatives. One came from the legislature, one came from the citizenry. And the one that came from the citizens, which did not have a prohibition against flour, won by 73.4%. What a surprise there. But we are moving forward in all those states right now, and we applaud Mississippi, we applaud South Dakota, we applaud Montana, and of course New Jersey, and we look forward to seeing every single state one by one move forward. Whether we get a 2 elections of having to get 750,000 petitions, and so far in the 5-6 years that Regulate Florida has been working on this, they got just enough petitions to get a Supreme Court review, which, by the way, hasn't finished yet, even though it was put through almost a year and a half ago. But they came nowhere near, obviously, to getting 750,000. That takes a lot of money, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that when you need to get 60% of the vote in Florida, and you can see that over 10 million people are voting in this state, that is definitely a concern of how do you reach that many people? How do you have the strength, the TV time? How do you have the media power to go up also against the powers that be that don't want this? The private prison lobbies, Disney, in the different corporations in this state that look at cannabis as a threat to their bottom line. And the fact is that we've seen, adult use take off and be very successful in states like Nevada. And for crying out loud, I mean, Florida compared to Nevada ecologically is a paradise versus a desert. Who would rather smoke a joint on a beach, in South Beach or in Clearwater than versus having to drive all the way out to the desert, spend all your money gambling, and have to, go to the drive-thru on the reservation to be able to get your cannabis at 2 in the morning,
Well, that's just it. We still have a law almost across the country right now that basically the only place you can legally partake, even if it's the medicine you so desperately need to survive or be able to work and things of that sort, is in the privacy of your own home, provided you actually own that home. Because if you are in a tenant situation, your landlord can ban you from even going there. So you have to go someplace where it is illegal to partake, just even though you have a medical card, even though you are totally able to go ahead and do it. And that is why we're looking forward to the possibility moving forward of cannabis consumption lounges, possibly moving forward. Right now, it's a matter of skirting the laws in some states, but you will see new places that you can go legally and safely. There are a couple of places that are working it right now, and you will see great things coming forward in regards to consumption lounges, because we need to be able to have someplace else besides the privacy of the home that we own, and most of it don't own our own homes, to go ahead and be able to utilize the medicine that for so many people is so desperately needed.
Gary, you hit that on a really big point there with cannabis consumption lounges. It's not about necessarily creating a recreational atmosphere to have fun in, but in fact, as you said before, there are people who are in exigent circumstances. They can't necessarily cultivate at home. They can't necessarily smoke in comfort of their own home because they may be renters. The vast majority of people, in Florida who are working class, it's hard enough to afford a 1-bedroom apartment in this state, what the wages that working class people make, which is why, shout out to everyone who supported Amendment 2 and increasing the minimum wage over the next few years in the state of Florida. There have been several states that have done that. And in every state where they have increased the minimum wage, they have seen an economic boom. So for those naysayers and those concerned about rising costs and rising prices, the fact is that when we have raised the minimum wage, the people have raised the minimum wage in those states. They've seen the cost of living in those states, the quality of living go up, and to help match the cost of living. And I think, what we're looking at here in Florida, as long as home grow is denied, as long as, public consumption is denied, people are looking for solutions. Intelligent people on our board here at Suncoast Normal are looking for solutions that we're trying to work with. And I believe consumption lounges are definitely one opportunity that we can create in the short term, in the intermediate. Obviously, the goal is legalize it to ensure that every responsible user has safe and reliable access. To me, that means home grow. To me, that means full decriminalization. It means removing it totally from the Schedule 1 status, both at the federal level and at the state level. And so, the biggest concern a lot of people have is the government stepping in and over-regulating this, which it has for obviously over a century now. And so I think that a main concern for a lot of folks can be assuaged with these public consumption lounges. And when you hear consumption lounge, I think of Ybor City in the 2000s. I mean, every club was a cannabis consumption lounge back in the good old days, right?
Not officially, but yeah, kind of the situation.
And Tampa, pretty much every strip club other than Mons Venus is a cannabis consumption lounge as well.
Well, we look forward to a new era and new opportunities, and of course, in here in Suncoast Normal, we have a number of bills we intend on putting through to legislation this year, and we are going to need your help. Because obviously one person can't change all the minds and hearts of the legislators. Many of them are on the fence, and a lot of them who react to money have to understand that a lot of us don't have money, but we do have heart, and we do have stories to tell. And if you have a story to tell that would help us get through some of the legislation we're working on, like employee protection, where if you have a medical card, they can fire you just for having a medical card, not even having to pass a test positive. Or if you are in an institution, say for instance, if your grandmother is elderly and had Parkinson's and was put into a hospital, and she was told, "I'm taking your grandmother's medicine away for Parkinson's that's working, as in cannabis, and we're going to put her on a regimen of drugs that don't work because that's what we decided," that's going to change too. But we need your help in regards to that. And we also need, in the state of Florida, we need to revive our tourist industry, of course, because COVID hit us really hard, which means if you have a medical card, and utilize it while you're here so that grandma can enjoy her vacation in Florida and come here on vacation and not go away on probation or not leave at all in some cases.
Indeed, we don't need any more grandmothers locked up because they decided to bring their vape pen to Disney World.
Now, in regards to the minimum wage deal, I first off want to hats off to John Morgan, the financier who put that through, because he does not gain anything financially in regards to moving the minimum wage up. And for those people who didn't read it possibly, and who thought that all of a sudden we're going to go straight to $15 an hour, which is a 83% increase from the current minimum wage in 1 year, that's not what it says. It says that it's going to happen over 5 years at $1 an hour. So it's going to take time for us to transition to that point in Florida, because Florida does not move that fast. But it will benefit people in the long run. And believe it or not, folks who have more money in their pocket tend to spend it. They don't shove it in their mattress forever. And that means that the economy will benefit from having people being able to not only pay their bills, but have some recreational funds to be able to have, like, for instance, a meal in Ybor, which would be very nice to have, or an occasional drink as well.
I gotta admit that I see that firsthand. First off, I see a lot of tourists. I mean, there's almost one every single day who comes wandering into the CBD store and is asking if they can buy weed. I'm a medical patient in another state, and we end up having to turn them down. Not only that, but giving them the sad story that they're not going to be able to go to the MMTC, that their best option is the CBD flower that we have, which is good, but whatever.
Well, and a shout out to my friend Bridget Kerouac over in Stewart, or on the East Coast, who came here from Maine with her medical card that she'd gotten from Dustin, and she decided to come here to Florida because we were getting ready to get medical cannabis legalized, and she thought, all right, well, great, I'll just be able to continue as we went on. And while waiting for it to actually happen, she decided that she couldn't wait any long because she has fibromyalgia and needed that medicine for herself. And so she decided to go ahead and buy some hydroponic supplies. And what a surprise, the police followed her home from the hydroponic store, this cute lady in her 40s approximately, and for no reason they followed her home, and they claimed that they smelled something in her garage, which was at that point in time 10 seedlings that were approximately 3 inches tall. Here's big news: you don't smell anything from a 3-inch seedling. But that said, they arrested her, and the trial took almost a year. Our friend Mike Minardi went ahead and defended her in court, and they decided to drop the charges, but that she had to stop cultivating at home, period. So it was a big boon when we actually had medical cannabis, but the damage at that point in time to her life was already done.
You guys, did I ever tell you guys that the cops actually came to my house like a year ago? And there was a variance in my power. That's what they were saying, and that they wanted to check out if I had a grow operation in there. And quite honestly, I think there really wasn't it's not like I paid more in my power bill that month, and quite, normal used to be registered at my house. So I think that was the actual situation there. Like, there's this marijuana nonprofit in a private dwelling, we have to check this out. What excuse can we give?
Well, the additional power usage is how they oftentimes catch people who are doing home grows, because of the amount of electricity it costs to go ahead and operate the lights and the air conditioning and things of that sort.
Honestly, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that makes no sense to me. How is the power company going to go and call the cops on somebody because all of a sudden they're spending more money on power? I do not understand that.
Or all of a sudden your next door neighbor is spending more money. That's another way that happens sometimes.
The electric companies in Colorado clearly don't care. I mean, I've seen Colorado electric bills as high as $1,200 a month for folks operating their own grows. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you said it right, Carlos. The electric company wants those dollars. They want that money. I think the problem that you encountered was corruption. Police corruption in particular. The Tampa Police Department, among its vice squad, among its DUI unit, is notorious for officers that are corrupt, that have actually killed people, and gotten away with it. And it harkens back to members of the DUI squad back in 2014 pulling over community activist Arthur Green, who was in the middle of a cardiac arrest incident, and instead they thought he was swerving for a DUI. Rather than providing proper medical assistance, they throw someone on the ground, they handcuff him, and very similar to what happened with George Floyd the police ended up taking this man's life. And to me, that in itself reeks of corruption that needs to be rooted out. And sadly, the current mayor of Tampa, who's the former police chief, believes that she doesn't have any bad cops under her watch. And so that's why I say elections have consequences.
I mean, what was the situation with her, the biking while black? Like, you know, apparently when she was, you know, head of the police here, like there were more black people that were pulled over on their bicycles, and she like justified that somehow. I don't know.
9 out of 10 people who received bicycle citations were black. And in particular, I think a vast majority of them were black men. So if you take, how does 6% of the city's population account for 90% of its citations? That is definitely something that it reeks of institutional and systemic racism.
Well, that sounds like racism to me.
I guess what we have to talk about next is what are the next steps? Well, here in the state of Florida, the first thing that happens after the election, usually after everything is certified, is we have what is called the legislative delegations that happen in every single county in the state. And this is where citizens come up and they talk to the legislators that work for that particular area and tell them about what legislation is needed. And of course, the local folks are asking for some money for their individual projects and things of that sort. But this is your chance as a citizen to come out and tell legislators what your ideas are for legislation moving forward. And in many cases, this is the chance for legislators to find out what the citizens want so they can start working on deciding what bills they want to move forward. And to that effect, next week, we'd like to see one of those new elected officials come up on this show that they think can happen in next week's legislation. So if you are a legislator who is recently elected or previously elected and wants to discuss that topic, we want you on the show. And if we can get you on this week or next week, that would be fantastic. Please contact us at through the Florida Normal Suncoast Normal page, and we can work on possibly getting you on here and having your say. Now, in regards to the folks who've been very nice in regards to talking to us today I see the feed here, Ms. Vanderford and Mr. Hefner, we apologize for not having as much time to go ahead and go over some of the concerns you have because this was mostly a guest day, but we do want to hear from you guys and have a Q&A with our loyal subjects here, so to speak, who are a part of our community. And we want you to be a part of our community. And to that effect, here comes the commercial, guys. Of course, Suncoast Normal is a membership-driven organization, and the membership itself is not expensive, but oh my gosh, the rewards you can get, besides just this really neat pin over here on this side, I'm looking at backwards, the gold cannabis leaf, it shows that you are a proud member of Normal, and in particular Suncoast Normal, and we want to see you in Tallahassee telling your stories, helping move this legislation, and being part of the solution. So last week we talked about, we had a video of The Emperor Has No Clothes by Jack Hare, which is offered to anybody who can join and bring in 3 other members with you. That video, which is very hard to find, and which has Jack Hare talking in his own words about the situation, and along with Johnny Lepp, who is having his own issues in California right now, but is staying strong, who was also a part of the system, so to speak, that he had to deal with. We want you we want you here working with us. We want you here coming to Tallahassee. When I go to Tallahassee, I want to see the entire front row full of Suncoast Normal members who want to be stand up and be counted. Even if you don't want to speak, just be there and be part of the solution. We're looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, honestly, I go to a lot of these. I tend not to speak at them, but, you know, you guys appreciate the moral support, right? You know?
Indeed. It always feels good to get up in front of a room of politicians and know you have 50 people having your back.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And Carlos also has some Delta 8 flour, which we are also doing as a giveaway for our new subscribers, correct?
I forgot about that.
This is why you need Lion's Mane.
Gary here is providing the history and the information about hemp, and I'm just gonna throw some hemp flour in there, specifically 50/50 Delta 8 and CBD hemp flour. It's the strain is sour cherry, and it's gonna be a quarter for what was the qualifications there, Gary? It's like you join and you get like how many people to join?
Yeah, you join. You bring 3 other people with you at $25 each for the membership, which is very small compared to what you will achieve and what we will achieve with it. We don't we don't do this for money. If we did, I wouldn't be wearing clothes from Salvation Army. That said, we are dedicated to you, the cannabis community, who needs this medicine for your livelihood, for your life, for your love. And we will support you if you will support us. That is what it comes down to.
So go to our website, suncoastnormal.org. That's NORML. You can also follow us on social media at Suncoast Normal. That's on Facebook, that's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, that's on YouTube, a bunch of different stuff. So please go to the website, follow us on social media, just show up to an event, support us. You know, we are here for you guys. We don't get paid. We're volunteers. We're taking the time out of our day to make some change happen. And, you know, we hope you join us. You know, it's the only way that change is actually going to happen is we band together. So love you guys. And,
you know, Sally, coming up next, para los nuestros amigos Latinx.
Whoa.
La rotación en español coming up.
I didn't understand what you said at all, but
that is because even though you are Cuban, which I'm not going to hold the race against you at this point in time.
Cuban.
You're semi-Cuban.
So what did you say? The Spanish version of the rotation?
You're kind of like a pressed sandwich when they put chicken in it instead of the pork. It's just,
I'm like the Cuban sandwich, but they
white bread and possibly beyond burger instead of the pork. I would think it's.
Carlos is Cuban, right? So you know it's a little bit different with me when only one of mine is Cuban. So
so
both of them are Cuban.
So what is a vegan Cuban?
A vegan Cuban.
It tastes terrible. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yo, it's different like every time. It's seriously different every time. It's just a bunch of veggies and they try to make it taste like a Cuban sandwich. And I think they're all delicious. But
well, to all you guys who have a plant-based life, and this is a great plant we're talking about here, not just all your food. Mm-hmm. We thank you for being on the rotation this week. Next week, we hope to have some great guests on there. Legislators, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're planning on doing, and we want to help you do it.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Here comes the outro.